the US Constitution, in 1863 abolishing the slavery. And thereafter, the 14th Amendment, which came in 1868, which spoke of equal protection of laws, which we borrowed from the US Constitution. With the abolition of slavery not being accepted by the Supreme Court of US, there were people who were black-skinned, who were being not treated as citizens of the country. They were always second-class citizens. They were not permitted to get into the trains, which you must have read about the experiences of Mahatma Gandhi in South Africa. They were not permitted into restaurants. They had to sit in separate rooms to have a meal. The schools were segregated. There is nothing like equality. There was nothing like equality. There was one Mr. Plessy who said, enough is enough, let me see why I will not be permitted to get into a train in New Orleans. He brought a first-class ticket and then he wanted to enter a train. He was stopped. And then he said, you cannot enter into this compartment, there is a separate compartment for you, you go and then sit there. He resisted, he was arrested and he was also prosecuted. He went to the court and then he said, what about this 14th Amendment? It says equal protection of laws. So how am I, being a citizen of this country, not permitted to travel in a train along with my co-citizens? Unfortunately, another black day in the US constitutional history, Plessy versus Ferguson was a judgment of the Supreme Court which said that it's all right. You might be saying that there is a 14th Amendment, but otherwise there are two classes of people in this country, the whites and the blacks. There's nothing wrong in asking you to travel. We are not asking you not to travel in a train. We are not asking you to go to school, not to go to school. We are also providing facilities in the school for you. You can go and then get educated. There's nothing wrong with that. It took about 50 years for this judgment of Plessy versus Ferguson to be reversed by the US Supreme Court. Most of you must have heard about this judgment of Brown versus Board of Education. You must have heard your seniors speaking about this. Brown versus Board of Education, Topeka was a judgment that was delivered by the US Supreme Court reversing Plessy versus Ferguson. And that case pertained to a school where black children were made to sit in separate classrooms. They were not permitted to study along with the other whites. So there's a racial segregation. And the US government was supporting the segregation by saying that all these people are equal. There's no problem about equality, but they are separate. They cannot be treated on par with us. The Supreme Court came heavily down upon the government. It reversed Plessy versus Ferguson. And then it said that there cannot be a case of a human being treated differently on the basis of his color. And that's how there was development of law after Brown versus Board of Education. I should tell you, gentlemen, that it was not so easy when this judgment came in 1953. The southern part of the United States of America resisted the implementation of this judgment, and President Eisenhower had to send the armed forces for the purpose of getting this judgment implemented, because still people who are black in color were not treated on par with the other whites in the country. But ultimately things improved. It doesn't mean that as of now there is no racial discrimination in USA. There is still. If you are following the newspapers, you must have seen the last 2-3 years about discrimination on the basis of color, the articles that are written. There is some interesting fact which I have to tell you. There is an organization of the black community in USA which fights for the rights of the blacks. And Brown versus Board of Education was argued by one lawyer by name Thurgood Marshall. He became the first black judge of the Supreme Court, and he was there serving the Supreme Court of USA for about 30 years. He was a distinguished judge of the Supreme Court. Mary did not suffer. He was a black. and nobody could talk about his not being meritorious. So it's not as if somebody being given an advantage over the others for the purpose of uplifting some persons who are disadvantaged, who would be to the sacrifice of merit. That's not true. Why I told you about this case, Dred Scott and Brown versus Board of Education, is for this reason. Reservations mainly in this country come in the form of percentages that are fixed in educational institutions, which is an eyesore for other persons who are critical about reservations going overboard. There are cases, might be, that where reservations are going overboard for other reasons which are not legal. But the law, as I just said, is that reservations also should be within bounds. And then only you will be ensuring that there is social justice that is meted out to such of those persons who are destitutes and deprived people in this country. Now let's go to equity, which is the second principle of social justice. What is equity? Is equity and equality the same? Equality and equity are two concepts, two different concepts. Equality is, as I said, that treating all persons at par. So a person from a weaker section of the society might say that, why are you not giving me access to the well in a village? Or why are you not giving me access to resources? I'm also entitled for access to all those. That is equality. Equity, as I said earlier, is proportionate equality. That is, providing the necessary tools for a person in need. Assuming there is a person from the weaker section of the society who is not in a position to pursue his trade or occupation because he doesn't have the resources. You are providing what all he needs. Let us take education again. It is common knowledge that people coming from the lower sections of the society, now things definitely have improved, but there is a lot of development that has to happen. They do not have access to education because if they are coming from remote corners of the state or the country where there is no facility, they would not be in a position to even send their children to other places where there are schools so that they can have access to schools. What happens is, if they cannot send their child to another school for lack of accommodation in a hostel, then they would not be able to send their child to study. There are social welfare hostels. I'm aware of the facilities that are created by the government, but whether the facilities that are that have been created by the government are really catering to all the persons who deserve this reservation. So equity is a principle by which the state government should provide access to all these resources by identifying persons who are in need and then providing what they want. A person with all facilities does not need anything at all, even if he belongs to a weaker section of the society. But providing those tools is the principle of equity, and that is what again connected to proportional equality. And the third principle of social justice is participation. Why is participation important? A few people can't sit in the capital city and then decide what is good for the entire public. How would they know what the people coming from weaker section wants? How would they understand the needs? I'm also aware that there is representation from the weaker sections in the assemblies, in local bodies. They are there, but still participation of persons in need who need social justice is very important, because they are the ones who can express their problems, who can also give an opinion as to what is required to be given to them. Let us take the state government from Hyderabad, with no participation of people coming from Adilabad or some other tribal area. I'm not saying Adilabad is a tribal area in Adilabad. So they might not be in a position to understand exactly what the need is. Definitely they would know. They have the bureaucrats to inform them what the needs are, but that's again a second-hand information. You involve those people who are actually undergoing certain problems, understand their problems, and provide what they want. For that you need participation of those persons in need in decision making and implementation. So this is the third principle. The fourth principle is diversity. What is this diversity about? We're talking about this country being a pluralist country. We live in diversity, we live in diverse conditions. But the state should be in a position to understand all these diverse conditions, and this can happen only with participation of people. Diversity is the beauty of this largest democracy in this world. All of us are still happily living in this country because somewhere all of us definitely know that there are people coming from diverse backgrounds. I would just give you one advice when I'm speaking of diversity. Having seen life as a lawyer, as a judge, I experienced that most of us have this bad habit of being judgmental towards people. So whatever we think is right might not be right for others. But I cannot judge a person on the basis of what I think is right. I do not know his background. I do not know his problems. He might be doing something which I don't like because of various other reasons. I cannot be judgmental and then say that he's a fool, he's an idiot, what he's doing is wrong. Understanding of diversity would also make you stop being judgmental about people. Because people coming from various parts of the country, coming from various backgrounds, when you mix with them, you would understand the diversity. I was very fortunate that I shifted from here a long time back. I was practicing law in Delhi, and I traveled the length and breadth of this country arguing in almost all the high courts in the country. I've seen so many people of various hues, and then I've learned so much from life. Only interacting with people you would understand that you should not be judgmental. You should understand the diversity of this country to promote the unity of this country. Only when you understand diversity, then the state government can provide social justice to those people who are in need. The last important principle of social justice is human rights. Ladies and gentlemen, human rights is a very important principle of social justice, because all over the world, including the developed West, you would see that human rights are violated mainly in respect of weaker sections of the society. 75% of the under trials in this country have not got bail. 75% of persons in jail are under trials who have not got bail. We say that following Justice Krishnayar's judgment in Gudikanti Narsimulu, which it went from Andhra Pradesh, that bail is a rule and jail is an exception. But still we see so many people rotting in prisons. And our prisons, if the capacity of the prison is about 4 lakhs, there are 6 lakh prisoners. I was dealing with a case of Tihar jail. The capacity of Tihar jail was 15,000. There were 21,000 prisoners. All of them coming to the court and saying, there is COVID, please permit us to go. Let us go home. Ultimately we permitted them to go home for about 6 months and then they came back. But otherwise, while hearing those cases, we came to know that most of the jails in this country are overcrowded, and in spite of the facilities that are made by the state, still the conditions in the jail are really not to the best of the standards that are necessary to maintain human dignity. Supreme Court in Francis said through Justice Bhagavati that merely because a person is in jail, he does not lose his human dignity. Even he has a right to say that he should be permitted to live in human dignity, though might be behind bars. Human right violations You speak of torture, you speak of cases that are being registered. Take out the statistics, you would see that the majority of the people against whom criminal cases are lodged come from the weaker sections of the society. And this is not something special to this country. There was a study done, and blacks in USA are more in number insofar as the accused in criminal cases are concerned. And in a study done again by a research institute, it said it's about 80% of the blacks feel that they are not being given justice because they are blacks. 63% of the whites feel that might be true. They might not be getting justice because they are not whites. Human rights violations have to be stopped. It's not only for the purpose of persons who are coming from the weaker sections, but human rights violations are demeaning, and they are definitely contrary to the civilized world. Nobody can stand any violation of human rights. Human rights is an inalienable right of a person, which is naturally given to a person, and that right is to have liberty and to be permitted to live with dignity. So the 5 principles that I've mentioned about social justice are those principles who come from the philosophy of Lasky, who was the one who propounded this theory of social justice, which became very prominent in the 19th century with the Industrial Revolution. What about the other justices which are mentioned in the preamble, like political justice and economic justice? Political justice we have, all of us have a right to vote. Yesterday I was asked to speak on fundamental duties at another forum, and then in that connection I was preparing while reading Justice Verma's recommendations, where he wanted 2 aspects to be included in fundamental duties. One is right to vote and the other is right to pay tax. I was reading a news item 2 days back in connection with some case. Supreme Court was observing that only 4% of the Indians pay tax. And right to vote, I know we would be more interested in watching a cricket match than going and then voting standing in the queue, because we would say that it's all right, our vote doesn't matter. But Justice Verma said that this has to be made a moral obligation for all citizens that they should go and vote. I was also telling the audience yesterday that in Australia they fine $20 if a person doesn't go and vote. And there are other countries who penalize people for not exercising their franchise. All of us, I think, have to be alert to the situation that our vote matters, because the most important right of a person, though not constitutional, which is only a legal right, is a right to exercise your franchise. So all of us, I think, have to take this as a duty, even if it is not mentioned in the fundamental duties. Where does a role of a lawyer come in social justice? If you see the directive principles, there is one provision in the directive principles which speaks of legal aid. The weaker sections have to be given an opportunity to access all the resources and facilities. Apart from that, the Constitution provides that the state should also facilitate access to justice through legal aid to persons who cannot afford to go to courts. I do not want to make a comment on the legal profession, but one fact is that access to justice is not that easy. The problem is that there is a lack of awareness of rights. If you go to the hinterland, you would find that a large number of people do not really know what their rights are. They are really not bothered. A person is bothered only about making his ends meet. A person is bothered about sending his child to school if he can. A person is bothered about a roof over his head and some clothes to wear. He is not bothered about his rights, but still, when the state is obligated to provide all these resources, he is not even having the knowledge that The state has a duty to provide all these resources to him, and then he has a right to life which is guaranteed under Article 21 of the Constitution of India, and that he can go and demand that the state government has to provide all these resources. This is where the role of a lawyer comes in. When I was speaking about Roscoe Pound's attributes of a lawyer, when I was saying public service, this is where the lawyers become relevant. Every lawyer should do some pro bono work. There is a feeling amongst lawyers of the high courts that senior advocates on the Supreme Court fleece clients. They take a lot of fees, and even we judges, we keep talking, see, this fellow is making so many lakhs of rupees, and he doesn't come prepared and argue. I should tell you a secret, as you speak about judges in the verandas, we also speak about you. So, when a lawyer comes to argue, especially me being from the bar, most of my colleagues were depending on me to tell them, what about this lawyer? Can we believe him? Can we rely upon him? And then most of the discussion during lunches or teas would be that how many cars this person has and how many houses he has. And this fellow can't argue a case, he's made so much money. I'll tell you a fact that I'm not sure about a few lawyers, but most of the senior advocates in the Supreme Court, I'm sure even the senior advocates here follow, do pro bono work without publicity. The present Chief Justice of India, Uday Lalit, and me, every week we were doing a minimum of 4 cases of legal aid. This was the undertaking which we gave to the Supreme Court Legal Service Committee, and we were giving them more importance than the other cases because we knew that persons who are in jail, whose cases are being sent to us, have nobody to support them. And following us, this I'm talking of 2013-14, following us, a number of senior advocates started doing it. And because of senior advocates coming into this panel of Supreme Court Legal Service Committee, there is some sort of a confidence in people who were sending their cases that at least justice is being done. But amicus curiae briefs in the High Courts and the Supreme Court are definitely not to the liking of not only the judges, even the clients whom they are representing, because people take these briefs very lightly. Adjournments are taken, preparation is not good, resources are also not there because they don't have the papers, and the legal aid committees always keep complaining that they haven't received documents. And normally we condone delay of even 1,000 days, 2,000 days in a legal aid brief, but even that also becomes unmanageable sometimes. So I would request all the lawyers to take interest in helping people in need. That's the service that you do to society. We need not go and sweep the streets. We are not meant to do that. But use the instrument of law for the purpose of improving the lot of people. I was speaking about under trials being in prisons. There is a need that groups of lawyers have to be formed if they can have access to these persons who are in jail for long number of years, and then if their cases can be taken up in the appropriate courts, and if their cases can be argued pro bono, that would be providing relief, and that is the service that you do to society. Only today I was reading in Live Law, which all of you might be reading, that about 150 cases came up before the Supreme Court, and Justice Chandrachud is hearing that case, where persons are in jail after their conviction during the pendency of their appeals for a period of more than 15 years. So that's the pathetic situation. There are people who are granted bails but who cannot come out of courts because there is nobody to exercise bail bonds for them. So these are certain things which have to be taken up by the lawyers, and they would be discharging their obligation under the Constitution apart from their profession, which would give them all a lot of satisfaction of being of help to other people. It is not that we have to give up our own professional activity for the purpose of doing this, but along with the activity that we have taken for ourselves, please be of some help to others. One aspect which needs mention, which had the concern of Ambedkar, is the fracture of the society on the basis of caste and creed. Ambedkar thought that out of the 3,000 castes which were existing then, there would be some way where people would unite and live as one people who would have the country at their heart and not the caste as their heart. All of you from your school must have experienced till now the importance of caste in the society. As you grow up, you are told that you belong to a particular caste, you have to move only with those persons from that caste. And then as you grow up, you only live in those fragments and you really do not see the world. As you grow up, you form into factions, and then you would always be at loggerheads with persons coming from the caste. We will have to shed these parochial tendencies. If we have to be a united country, we will have to someday give up this caste, the religion, the region, and live as an Indian at our heart. I'm not very sure whether it is going to happen, but as the founding fathers of the Constitution wanted this country to develop, striving for excellence of all persons in this country. You would only get excellence when you give up these tendencies of getting stuck to caste. It is always some sort of an attraction that, oh, we are a small group, I would only promote a person from this group. This is for appointment to public services, this is for admission to schools, and then you would see fights coming to the Supreme Court saying that, oh, we are all fighting for our caste, we want reservations. It's not sufficient. And the number of castes which are fighting for reservations are doing very, very well in their own fields in various states, but still, if you are in large numbers, you have an obliging government which will succumb to your pressures for their own needs. But otherwise, just imagine the damage that is being done to the social fabric. If you get stuck to a caste, if you get stuck to a state, so your vision has to be much higher, then only you will develop as an individual. So give up this caste. Now I will just touch upon a last point on social justice. See, social justice is only for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, or the weaker sections of the society. Who are these weaker sections of the society? It's not scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, BCs, not only them. The weaker sections of the society are the marginalized. At some point of time, women, they were called to be weaker section. I don't consider the weaker section. I see half the High Court judges women here in this. 1/3 is a very good number. 1/3. Justice Ginsburg said that when she was studying in law school in US, she was the only woman in class. She always felt, why can't there be another woman sitting with me in class? And when I was practicing here in this High Court, there were only a few lawyers to be seen. And as a judge, when I was visiting my own home state, Andhra Pradesh, I was told that 60%, 50 to 60% of judges in the subordinate judiciary are women. And I also found from statistics in various other states, there are a lot of women who are doing very well in the profession, especially taking up a job of a judge, which is not an easy one, which I already said. But still, isn't there discrimination? There is. In some parts of life, you have male chauvinism, if I can call it, male dominance. You still want to be superior to women, saying that I'm the breadwinner. I think this also has to set. This is a stereotype which has to give way to equality. So when you're talking of weaker sections, first I spoke about them. And then who are the other weaker sections? You have children. There are so many children who are in need of help. I was handling a matter for the past 1.5 years during COVID. And I was periodically reviewing what has happened to children who have lost either parents in the COVID or at least one parent. We found that the number of children was running into lakhs, and then thanks to all the state governments and the central government's cooperation, we could manage to ensure that all these children were taken care of under the provisions of the Juvenile Justice Act. Most of them, I'm not saying that all of them, most of them, they were given succor by being provided the basic needs, and they were also asked to be continued in schools without insisting on fees. We even asked some private schools also to give them proper education without insisting on fees because they have already lost their parents. Apart from this, there is child labor. Children who are to be educated, one of the fundamental duties which has been inserted in the fundamental duties chapter by an amendment in 2003 is that every parent has a duty to send his child to school. Apart from Article 21A in the Constitution, which makes it a fundamental right to all children below the age of 14 years to be educated. There is lack of education because they want more helping hands to feed the mouths. They want people in big numbers who are children in the family to go and work so that they can also earn and then feed the family. This has to be stopped. The governments have to take action to ensure that all children receive basic education at least. And child welfare is very important. It's not only in respect of children in need. If you are aware of the Juvenile Justice Act, there are two sorts of children. One is the child in need and the other is child in conflict with law. Child in need is a person whom you find on streets. Person who are left by their parents. We also gathered information on that while dealing with this matter. You see a number of children at street lights. Some of them go back to their homes in the evening after loitering there. After spending a few years on the streets, they will get addicted to vices and then they become criminals. And that's how the status of child in need changes to a child in conflict with law. And you have a criminal in the making. And you have anti-social elements being bred on roads. So unless all these children are taken under the fold of the state, there's going to be a serious problem. And there are other people who are LGBT, who are persons who are marginalized because of their sexual orientation, people who have been historically looked down upon as persons who are a menace to the society. Mind you, ladies and gentlemen, it's just what their orientation is which has come to them naturally. It's not as if they have acquired it forcefully. We cannot change that. You have to accept them as individuals, and the Supreme Court in Navte Johar has dealt with the need for correcting the historical ill or evil of not treating them as equals. So these are the persons who are in need of social justice. I was also in the Supreme Court handling a matter of sex workers. During COVID, Justice Bhuyan was mentioning about it. During COVID, there was a case that was filed before us that dry ration was not being given to sex workers. Sex workers who are registered by NACO are in lakhs. Unregistered sex workers would be many more, thousands and thousands. Because of their not having proof of identity, as they don't have ration cards, see, if they're living in a place, nobody is going to enter into a rental agreement with them. There are no Aadhaar cards, there is no ration, and loss of business due to COVID, and most of them were starving. They did not have a facility even to stay. So we directed from the Supreme Court that without insisting on Aadhaar cards, dry ration has to be given to all sex workers in the country. And again, thanks to the cooperation of all the state governments, their needs were taken care of. There were a few thousands even from this state. I was keenly following Telangana and Andhra Pradesh also, but their needs definitely have been taken care of. We pushed the government to issue Aadhaar cards to them because nowadays without Aadhaar you cannot do anything. So the UAIDAI, which issues the Aadhaar cards, also came forward saying that they would issue Aadhaar cards with a certificate if they bring from the NACO authorities. if they're in a list that was prepared by the NACO, and most of them have an identity. I am told by the lawyer who argued that case, Anand Grover, that world over we are almost the prime movers of providing identity to sex workers. The most important thing here is identity. A sex worker can stand today and say that I am also a human being. Till now, they are not even treated as humans. The constitutional courts, that is the high courts and the Supreme Court, during the past 75 years have done a wonderful job of protecting the rights of the underprivileged, people in need, destitutes and the deprived lot, and have added to the constitutional mandate of providing social justice to the needy. Thank you.